I obviously would prefer if it was the Taoiseach who was answering today, no offence, because I wanted to ask him his views. There are two words that haven't been uttered in the Dáil since it reported as Citizens' Assembly. Because last autumn the Taoiseach set up the Citizens' Assembly. He made it very clear that it would do a first-class job. Now, 10 days ago, the Assembly finished its deliberations. It recommended that the current 8th Amendment had to go, that the Dáil had to legislate for abortion rights, and that ultimately women themselves should be the people who make the decision that they need an abortion. So I was wondering if the Taoiseach felt that having the Citizens' Assembly was his brainchild. Does he feel like the parent whose child has rebelled against him? Because it's very clear that the Taoiseach thought the Citizens' Assembly was a pliable ploy that will come back with very minimal change. But when you put 99 members of the public into a room and ask them to discuss this topic, ask them to really engage and debate it, they actually come back with a compassionate response, a realistic response, and they want an end to hypocrisy. So, Minister, I want to ask you, do you agree that the Citizens' Assembly was a randomly selected representative sample of people from across the country, like the Taoiseach said? And if so, do you now feel— sorry, there's a lot of noise. Yeah. Do you now feel that so-called Middle Ireland might actually be more progressive than you and others thought? That the tone policing journalists were doing as well, advocating slow change, that they were actually behind the curve? Because after all, you, your current Minister for Health, your previous Minister for Health, for Adgar as well, thought it would be fine and dandy that a national maternity hospital could be given over to a religious order with a history of abuse and that nobody would think that a problem. But you were way behind public opinion because the general public thought otherwise. The Tuam scandal has graphically illustrated for the public that the Catholic Church wasn't pro-life when it came to poor pregnant women and their babies. But unfortunately, the change in social attitudes is not reflected in this Dáil. And it would appear that right now only Solidarity, People Before Profit and a handful of independents have the same position on abortion as the Citizens' Assembly has recommended. So, Minister, would you agree there needs to be a concerted campaign of engagement now of political pressure to bring most of the parties in the Dáil up to the level of public opinion on abortion rights? That the thousands who have been demanding repeal have to actively contact, seek meetings with TDs, telling them they want change and a referendum? Would you agree that the 5th anniversary of the death of Savita would be a very timely occasion for this issue to be resolved?
Thank you, Deputy.
And would you agree that having the Citizens' Assembly as your chosen method of dealing with the 8th Amendment, can I ask you, Minister, are you and your party going to accept its findings, or are you going to go in there and try to water them down, as has been advocated by some?
Thank you, Deputy Minister.
Well, first of all, I'll pass on your disappointment that the Taoiseach wasn't here to answer your question. I'm sure the feeling is mutual, but he has other business today. First of all, I'd like to say that this issue has been a very difficult and divisive issue throughout the history of this country, and I'm long enough around to recognise how difficult it has been for many people. And I think what you will see, I think that the motivation of the Taoiseach in establishing the Citizens' Assembly mirrors what he did in the case of the X case, where, as you know, the X case lay around for 20 years and no Dáil had the courage of its convictions to deal with what the Supreme Court had found in respect to the X case. And he established a process that allowed the Dáil to make those decisions, and those were done under his stewardship. And the approach he took was to have a Citizens' Assembly, to follow that up with an Oireachtas committee, and then to move on to legislate. And I think he is mirroring that approach in what he is doing now. And I commend the Citizens' Assembly and the work of Justice Lafoy for the work they have done, the painstaking work that they have taken upon themselves. And I'm looking forward to that report, which will be with us before the end of June. The Oireachtas, as you know, is now going to establish an all-party, both Dáil and Senate committee to examine the recommendations coming from the Citizens' Assembly, and that will come back to the House. and that will be done within 3 months of their sitting. So clearly the government's intention is that this will not lie untouched. This is an issue of very considerable importance to the people of Ireland. We have established an approach that has proved itself in the past, and I think it will give this the opportunity to this House to consider these issues in a fair and balanced way, without seeking to push people or bully people, but allowing a sensible debate based on the facts, based on the work done by the Commission and by others. And I think that is an approach that commends itself. It is the legislature doing its work, and I think it is innovative in bringing in the Citizens' Assembly, as you recognise yourself, has been a very useful exercise in broadening the base of the discussion that we can have. But we'll be coming back to the Oireachtas, and the opportunity will be here to thrash out the issues, and through the committee initially, and then back here on the floor of the House.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy Coppinger.
Minister, I hope you'll answer this in your second chance. I know it's coming back to a committee. I know it's coming back to the Oireachtas. My question was, will your members in Fine Gael implement these findings, or will they ignore them? That was a simple question. When they get onto the committee, will they seek to respect the deliberations that were made by the Citizens' Assembly, or will they seek to water them down? And I think, Minister, that one thing that you haven't recognised, and many other parties in this Dáil as well, it's no longer business as usual for church-state relations in this country. That's the reality. We've had the recent census figures where 75% increase in the numbers showing no religion. On Sunday, there will be a march at 2 p.m. from the Garden of Remembrance, organised by Parents for Choice, to demand that the National Maternity Hospital is taken away from religious control, that church and state are actually separated in this country. And can I say that to all of those young people, to women, to all of those who've demanded repeal and change for a whole number of years, that if this issue is not dealt with by the Dáil in the manner that it deserves, that the 5th anniversary of the death of Savita should be the occasion for the biggest ever pro-choice march in history in this country, but that people should not allow the political parties to be behind the curve, as they currently are, all of them, on this issue. And I'd appeal to young people in particular to do that. But if you could just answer in the second round whether Fine Gael will go into the committee respecting the Citizens' Assembly findings or not.
Thank you, Deputy Minister.
Well, first of all, I'll say that I believe that the Citizens' Assembly is a vital input into this debate, and I'm looking forward to the details of it, which I haven't seen. I don't think any deputy has seen. So I think you yourself recognise, and as an advocate of repeal, you want to see the legislature having responsibilities in this area. So I think the duty of every member of this legislature, be whatever party or none they come from, is to consider this issue on its merits and to make decisions here as a collective group elected by the people to decide on these issues and put whatever recommendations we decide upon to the people, if that is what's the judgment of the Dáil. The legislature does have to do its work, and I don't think while we welcome the view of the Citizens' Assembly, it is an input into our work, and I think it has been recognised that we need now an Oireachtas committee, which will be composed of both senators and members of the Dáil, to tease through those and come back to the Dáil with recommendations, so that we, as a collective group, can do the job we were elected to do.
Thank you very much.
And I think each and every deputy, as our party has recognised, each and every deputy has a responsibility to consider the merits of these issues and make decisions upon them.
Thank you very much, Minister. That concludes